Hello there. What I said I would try to avoid happening happened. So I said earlier this week I would pre-create the week's live streams, and I didn't do that. And now here we are with an impromptu going live. So for those that had attended yesterday, I mean, folks will know we were going to do this, but it's inconvenient. So my apologies. Um, so I'm just gonna grab my bell here for a second and then see if folks will come in and join in kind of as the notifications go out. So my understanding, although I'm not a YouTube pro, is that in order for you to get the notifications when I go live like this, you have to have clicked on the bell icon. And by clicking on the bell icon, that means that you'll get push notifications for when this channel goes live. So it's not just subscribing necessarily, I believe. And that's like this sort of feature that I think it's been around for a while, but some people had said that they weren't getting notifications for when I go live. And I think that's why. Maybe. Not sure. But yeah. So I want to offer kind of a slow rolling start, as we may have folks kind of filtering in here. He'll cover the minutia. So my name is Andrew. I am a certified level 2 mindfulness meditation coach in the Unified Mindfulness System. You can find out more about Unified Mindfulness at unifiedmindfulness.com. Consistent, right? Long URL, but it's a consistent. I imagine um.com was taken a long time ago. I am many things, but I am not a licensed therapist or mental health professional. That'll be today because we're going to talk a little bit about being aware of kind of high activation states or being hypervigilant. I'm a little tentative to use the term panic because if you have been diagnosed with a panic related or panic disorder, then that is to me outside of my skill set. So, but this idea from a more informal, colloquial ideas is when we think we've gone into panic mode, what are some things we can do as potential interventions? Again, if you have a clinical diagnosis, definitely want to lean on that from a particular perspective. So, and if you do have a diagnosis, it may be beneficial for you to put together in situations where you're in a more stable situation to put together kind of a plan of action, being able to highlight, especially for those that may be helping provide you with support. What is there a crisis? Is there a preferred crisis line that you would want to talk to? Who is your primary care provider? Who are people that may be grounding influences, and just kind of walk through those different things. The licensed therapist and all-around awesome person, Dr. Faith G. Harper, has kind of a plan of action that her book goes through, Your Brain on Depression, and they talk about that sort of plan of action. So putting together a plan of action would be definitely one thing to consider if you have a diagnosis for panic disorder or panic-related disorder. So for the rest, if that's not something that you've gotten yet, because getting a diagnosis may take some time, just considering some things around that. And again, all of these offered with the caveat of I'm not a licensed professional in the mental health space, but having been a volunteer in youth grief counseling, they do training for you to be able to show up in a way that is supportive for kiddos, especially when they're going through grief and loss, which is a really tough time. And so one of the things they talk about is a grounding exercise called 5-4-3-2-1 or grounding 5-4-3-2-1. So when we think about meditation, what we want to watch out for is thinking that meditation is going to fix all these things that may be presenting themselves. And so that may not be fair maybe not be fair. It's not really fair to meditation. Meditation may be really helpful in providing you the clarity of understanding when you're in a situation, or being able to help create a widening of that space between a stimulus and response. That's something that, the very, very famous quote from Viktor Frankl around that area of is really freedom at that point. And so we're looking for with mindfulness meditation is not to solve our problems, but to allow us the ability to have clarity and equanimity to be able to bring in someone we know may support us, or put in action an intervention that may help, or put the time and energy in to have a shelf of your medicines, as Jeff Warren says, these coping skills that you can be able to pull off the shelf and then use. And then also to have the clarity and conviction to put together something if you're in the situation, to have a plan of action, like I mentioned. And then I just recently found Dr. Faith G. Harper's stuff, or just Dr. Faith, I think she goes by as well. She's on Instagram as the Intimacy Doctor, I think. It's one of her focuses, but she does a lot of zines and publishing through Microcosm Publishing. And a lot of her titles have the F word in them. And so she, I think, has a very real and pragmatic approach to being able to look at situations and then being able to bring forth things that are ultimately pragmatic and helpful. So just knowing that from a sort of situation. So if you're joining now, one of the things we would mention today is just kind of working with the potential that you're in a highly activated state. So we may think of this as hypervigilant, so that we're in this very activated and vigilant state, and looking at that perspective, right? The original request, when we're in panic mode or in part of panic mode, and I just again want to be careful with my language around that. So the grounding exercise I mentioned, this is something 5-4-3-2-1 grounding is something that we would teach to, or that we would outline and practice and put into action for the kiddos that we were supporting at the grief and counseling camps. And so the name of it is, in essence, meant to help you be able to sort of work through that. And so before we would do anything with meditation, this may be one way for us to kind of get our nervous system in better alignment. And so 5-4-3-2-1 in essence is a mnemonic for us to be able to look for things around us. I said yesterday that we would talk about this idea of anchoring out, or using our external environment to help ground us. So we may not feel, very, very real feeling of us not feeling grounded. So in grounding 5-4-3-2-1, we look for 5 things we can see around us, and we want to be specific. So, I can see the black flag sign. I can see this little 8 treasures Buddhist thing. I can see my Mojave phone booth project book. I can see my crate that I acquired through appropriately legal means. And I can see, more books. So naming 5 things that we see around us, so that, in essence, things, sort of looking for things around us. The next one is 5 things that we can touch. So the first one, the 5th one was sight. The 4th one is touch. So things that I could touch. If you want to touch them, you can, but you don't have to. They're just, in essence, things you can touch, and you may have a proxy of what it would feel like to touch it. So I have a tea mug, and this is hot. And so, but that's something I can touch. I have a little wooden mat that it's under. It's another thing I can touch. Naming off these 4 things that we can touch. The next one would be the 3 things I can hear. So I can hear a fan in the distance, I can hear my own voice, and I can't hear anything else yet, but I'm sure I'll hear something soon. Then 2 is 2 things I can smell. And then 1 would be one thing I can taste. So again, the shorthand for this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is it's really the senses. It's the 5 senses. So and we're grounding out into those. So that would be the first thing that I would offer, is just that as an overall practice. If you're working with a youth or younger individual, you may, if you have bubbles around, you can get them at dollar stores. This is one of the things that we would provide to kids when we were doing camp counseling, or I shouldn't say camp. I was volunteering at the camp. It's one way to, in order for you to blow bubbles, you have to be able to control and extend your exhale. And we talk about that in our sequence for our afternoon idle sits. I always talk about extending and accentuating the exhale. That's a way to begin to help cue the nervous system to bring online the rest and relaxation state. So that's another thing to consider. Dr. Andrew Weil has written about, I think it's called 4-7-8 breathing. You breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you extend your exhale for a count of 8. And so that protocol is one way for you to look at bringing the nervous system potentially back in line. So caveat, so that you just are aware of it, that that breathing technique should produce some level of calm. But if it doesn't, then that's okay too. Just know that it may not have that impact for you. There's been a decent amount of research into that as a calming, sort of something to bring in line stress activation on everyone. The idea is, before we get talking for like 11 minutes, so that's, well, one, it's not a surprise, but two, before we get to meditation, we want to think about some of these pragmatic things we may do to be able to put those things in line. And then our sit that we're going to do is our something part of our contrast sit. We'll look at anchoring away. The overall technique that we'll teach in a unified mindfulness class as part of an 8-week curriculum is the idea of being able to anchor away, anchor out into the focus outside, if we want to use terminology. So see, hear, feel is our categories for meeting the experiences, and each of those categories has an external or outside. So we would be focusing out, and focusing out really is a shorthand for saying see out, hear out, feel out. And we're using that, much like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding, to ground into the environment around us. It may be beneficial for you to experiment with things that are calming. So being able to soft focus the eyes and take in a wide expanse, eyes open, may be helpful. And then also being able to notice and see out things around you. Again, same thing like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. If you search for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 coping, I think one of the number one hits for that will be a behavioral health provider list from Rochester EDU. So again, if the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mnemonic isn't helpful, just think about it being the 5 senses. So it doesn't really matter the mapping of them as much as we're looking at the process of grounding into the 5 senses. So what we'll do in our sit part is I'll encourage you to look at just sort of anchoring away. In the curriculum, though, we'll look at the notion of being able to anchor away and then being able to potentially look in. And we've talked a little bit about that in this idea of whatever reaction's happening for us will be coming up in see, hear, feel. So we can recycle the reaction if we feel resourced. And that's a big if we feel resourced. So if we don't feel resourced, then we can always look at anchoring away. The other option that's important to note is if you don't feel resourced, you may want to consider just suspending sitting, go for a walk, or do something that would be movement related. This is why having a coping list is really helpful, because then you can kind of say, okay, what's a go-to thing off my coping list? So, and then hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. I don't see any comments or questions in the chat, so I have that kind of like, maybe this is all just kind of like blah, blah, blah. But if you're just tuning in because because I didn't have the thing up. This was a bit of a request about talking about practicing with this sort of high activation, and so it's something to know is possible, but in essence, when you're sitting, I think it's important to realize that you're in control of what you do when you sit, and you're also in control of whether or not you're sitting. So you can always choose to suspend the practice. So, all right. So in the vein of getting our sit in, and not me not talking anymore, let's do this. So I invite you to take a posture that helps you be both relaxed and alert, upright, dignified, and begin practices like this with really establishing a base in the posture. We can do that on the floor, either lying down or sitting in a comfortable cross-legged posture, sitting on a chair, or standing. All incredibly valid ways of practicing. And then to begin, just seeing if there's any tension in the body. Each of us holds tension in different places and in different ways. Just seeing if the looking or noticing of tension allows you to relax, or maybe it will melt away. And if not, it's our first opportunity to bring no big deal quality. And then just looking for a few conscious breaths in through the nose and out through the nose, if that's available. And what we're looking for here is a slow and low tempo. So if you want, you can always put your hand on your chest or on the belly to see where you're breathing from. And ideally, we want to be breathing from the belly. That allows us to breathe low into the bottom of the lungs. And then using that exhale as a lengthening and extending. And like Jeff says, like Jeff Warren says, it's a downward motion. And to begin, we'll focus out, and we can choose to tune how we focus out. Again, that is a very common theme for this, that you're in control of your sit. What I offer are invitations, and you are 100% welcome to RSVP no. So in focusing out, you can have the eyes open, or maybe eyes halfway open or closed, your choice. If you have them open, you may wish to sort of soft focus, maybe a meter or two in front of you, 4 or 5 feet. And we're anchoring out. We're using anchors that are in our external sense fields. Having the eyes open may be jarring if you're used to practicing with them closed. using auditory sounds around you, or perhaps a grounding sensation in the body, a sense of feet on the floor. Regardless, any of those are pattern for being with that experience is to notice the attention there, soak it in, and then optionally label it for whatever that sense is. So for me, that would be see, see, hear, feel, hear. So noticing the screen moving, my eyes are drawn there. Hearing a fan behind me, my attention is drawn to that. And having my attention then brought to my feet. Allowing the attention to flow in a way that is not restrictive can be beneficial. And if you choose to label, considering using a slower labeling pace. And then one more thing, if you are using labels, again, those are optional. Skillful use of thinking, right? Just making sure that the mental tone of the labeling is in what Shinzen Young calls equanimity voice. So not necessarily channeling your inner yoga teacher, but somewhere pretty close. And again, the sense gates are open in how we're allowing our attention to move. So explore this, and I'll check in a little bit. Okay, good. So we're at a decision point. If your exploration of anchoring away through focus out is going well, then I encourage you to continue exploring this as your technique and just ride this day out with that technique. But if you want to get in your do nothing of the day, this is the time you can shift over and let go of the technique and just sit and know that you're sitting, allowing whatever happens to happen. Knowing that if this shift over into a stance of choiceless awareness starts to feel like it's not supporting your nervous system, you can always shift back to focus out. So you're the one sitting, you get to decide. Once you've made your decision, then move forward. that concludes our practice. A reminder to take some time and connect to your surroundings at your own pace. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for spending 30 plus minutes with me while I fumbled around with what I was going to say. Again, my success criteria for a sit is any sit that I make it to is a good sit. So that this was a good sit in that definition. Actually, the meta awesome level would be good and bad or extra. So, but thank you for this sit. A quick reminder, or just as a comment, this sounds like I'm like an infomercial for Faith Harper, but she's got a wide variety of books that are topical, and so her book on coping skills, or This Is Your Brain on Anxiety, I think is what it's called. They're really, really interesting, and they're just pragmatic for a topic that doesn't need to be complicated, but she can go deep on the brain science. And, I like to swear just as much as the next person. So you're very welcome, Brooke. And thank you, Sarah, also for joining. So before I go eat my lunch, I have to remember to make the live streams for tomorrow and Friday. So if you have any reports, I'm always game to hear those. The former teacher in me always loves to hear how people apply stuff. So that's always I always enjoy that. If you have questions, I'll do my best to offer some sort of qualified and appropriate response. Not to say that it will be an answer, but definitely can do that. So yes. Question is, am I able to practice while I guide? Yes. That did not come easily. So one of the core tenets that is present for Juliana Ray and Don McCormick, who are the people that they built the curriculum from Shinzen's techniques, is to work towards being able to practice or being able to guide from a place of practice. And so I think I was in one of the last cohorts that was taught and led by Juliana and Don. I think they now have a number of really qualified and talented instructors that are doing the level 2 training that I went through. So I'll just offer that the depth of practice is a little different each time for me, but I'm able to guide from a place of practice. My practice sometimes is me doing kind of a light form with the labels dropped of here. So I'm actually connecting with my own voice, which sounds like borderline narcissistic now that I say it out loud. Not intended, but I will often complete a sit with a deeper feeling of being in a meditative state than I would have gotten by my own. So that's weird. And I didn't realize that's common amongst guides until I heard Jeff say that. So I can't remember when it was, but Jeff Warren was on with Dan Harris, and he talked about how guiding guiding for Jeff is a core practice. And they were talking about how interviewing for Dan was a kind of coming from a place of practice as well. So yeah. I often don't know what I'm going to say, but I kind of know the kind of types of prompts I want to drop in. And so when I'm guiding, if I feel I'm getting pulled away often, then I'll bring in a prompt about being cool with that. Or if I notice that I'm kind of leaning forward or something, then I'll pull in a prompt. I may shift the prompt that I normally would plan for something to note that. Or when I hear a sound, how I see an image and how that would potentially pull you away. And so I do like kind of riff on those things a little bit. Not always to the best, maybe, but yeah, that's so there is letting the guidance put you in a spot where you can imagine what experience might be like for someone else. So, and I guess like I didn't realize this, but from the therapeutic side of things, I guess some therapists that are also meditation instructors will do sort of a guided, they do interactive guidance where there sort of is like a report kind of back and forth, and that's used then for how the guiding is done. So it's really interesting. So cool. Well, thank you for that, Brooke. I appreciate that. Uh, yeah, I have to come from the place of being a. I'm not that. I know that that'll help. It'll help with where things come from. So, but well, and my sincere apologies for my sort of erratic interlude at the beginning. Hopefully, it's helpful. The 5 4 3 2 1 grounding has been me in working. Not to say that I do this well, but maybe this is why it was so helpful for me. But I've worked with male kiddos 11 to 13, and that grounding, that kind of five senses grounding, that 5 4 3 2 1 grounding, has was really way more helpful than I had ever really imagined. And so I think I had done this camp counseling, or not I keep saying camp counseling. I had volunteered for this camp, this grief camp, for maybe 4 or 5 years, and then once I got a stability of knowing kind of what it didn't, then it really helped me to show up in a way that was helpful for the kiddos. So I really appreciated that. So tomorrow's backwards day, and by request, we're gonna do kind of a wider presence. I think Sarah called it satellite. I think that's what she liked for that, but we'll do that as our practice for tomorrow. Thanks again, and enjoy the day. I'm enjoying it so far.